The moving truck's engine rumbled outside my house, the monstrous metal beast come to devour my life. I can't believe this is happening, I muttered, watching men in blue overalls carry out furniture I'd owned for decades. Emily, my daughter, stood beside me, wringing her hands. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark truly didn't mean for this to happen." Mark, my son-in-law, the architect of my ruin. His investment opportunity had turned out to be a thinly veiled Ponzi scheme, and the authorities, seizing assets, had started with my house collateral for a loan I'd co-signed at his behest. "Sorry doesn't bring back my home, Emily," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. A burly mover bumped past, nearly knocking me off the porch steps. "Careful there," I snapped, the sudden outburst surprising even myself. Emily put a hand on my arm. "Dad, please, let's just go. We can talk about this later." "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice rising. "How your husband swindled me out of everything I own." She flinched, but didn't reply. Her silence was more damning than any argument. Inside, the house echoed with the ghosts of memories. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a gift from my late wife, was being wrapped in blankets. The dining table, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, was already gone. "They're taking everything, Emily," I said, gesturing around the emptying rooms. "Everything we built. It's just stuff." "Dad," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "We can replace it. What matters is that we're together." Her words rang hollow. I could see the fear in her eyes, the worrying lines etched around her mouth. But beneath it, I detected something else, a flicker of relief. We sat in the living room, now stripped bare, waiting for the movers to finish. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and regret. Finally, Mark arrived, his face pale and drawn. "Everything's arranged," he said, his voice strained. "We can go now." He didn't meet my eyes. "Go where?" I asked. He hesitated. "To the place we discussed." "In Florida," Emily jumped in, her tone overly bright. "It'll be wonderful. Dad, a fresh start. Sunshine, beaches, think of it as a vacation from my life, my memories, my dignity." The place they'd discussed with increasing frequency lately was an assisted living facility, a gilded cage designed to house the inconvenient elderly. They'd painted a rosy picture, gourmet meals, planned activities, round-the-clock care. What they hadn't said, but what hung heavy in the air, was the underlying assumption. Once I was safely tucked away, they could access the remainder of my assets, the ones Mark hadn't managed to squander. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly, "but I think I'll stay with an old friend." I saw a flash of annoyance cross Mark's face, quickly masked by a forced smile. "Are you sure?" "Dad, we're just trying to do what's best for you." "I'm quite sure," I replied, my voice firm. "I wouldn't want to be a burden." Emily pressed the issue, her voice tight with desperation. "But, Dad, your friend, he lives so far away. And what about your health?" "My health is fine," I said, standing up. "And my friend is closer than you think." I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in the facade of concern. The last of my belongings were loaded onto the truck. As I walked down the driveway, I turned back to look at the house, now empty and silent. A wave of sadness washed over me, but beneath it, a new feeling was taking root, a quiet, steely resolve. I had lost a lot, but not everything. I still had my wits, my dignity, and something they hadn't counted on. A few old friends in high places. "Let's go, Robert," a voice said from behind me. I turned to see a familiar figure emerge from a sleek black car parked down the street. Frank Miller, my former business partner, a man whose loyalty I had earned years ago in a different life, a life they knew nothing about. He offered a small, knowing smile. "I believe we have some business to discuss." I returned the smile, a genuine one this time. The game, I realized, was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Emily and Mark sat opposite me, their faces carefully neutral. "Dad," Emily began, her voice tight, "we're worried about you. This house site's too much for you to handle alone." I looked around at the familiar space, the bookshelves lined with my collection, the photos on the mantelpiece chronicling a lifetime of memories. This wasn't just a house, it was my anchor. "I manage just fine," I reply, my voice steadier than I felt. Mark cleared his throat. "Emily's right, Robert. This place is a burden. The upkeep, the bills," he trailed off, as if the very thought was exhausting. "It's a burden you caused, Mark," I said, meeting his gaze directly. He shifted uncomfortably. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, his failed business venture, the debts he'd accrued, the way he'd leveraged my home as collateral without my knowledge. Emily rushed to fill the silence. "That's in the past. Dad, we need to focus on the future. We've been looking into some options for you." She slid a glossy brochure across the table. "Palm Vista Senior Living," I read aloud, my stomach sinking. "Florida, thousands of miles away from everything I knew and loved." "It's beautiful, Dad," Emily chirped, pointing to pictures of manicured lawns and smiling seniors. "They have activities, social events. You wouldn't be alone." Alone? The irony was almost unbearable. I was surrounded by family, yet felt utterly isolated. "And," Mark added, his voice smooth, "selling this house would resolve a lot of outstanding issues he'd created." I picked up the brochure, pretending to study. "It certainly looks pleasant," I conceded, my mind racing. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was a doddering old man, ready to be shuffled off to some sunny retirement community. They pocketed the proceeds from the sale of my home. They were wrong. "I'll need some time to think it over," I said, my voice carefully neutral. Emily exchanged a quick glance with Mark. "Of course, Dad," she said, a little too brightly. "Take all the time you need. Dude, it would be best to decide soon. These places fill up quickly." I nodded, a plan beginning to form in my mind. I needed to buy myself some time to gather my resources to fight back. I wouldn't let them steal what was rightfully mine. "Perhaps," I suggested, "we could discuss this again next week, over dinner." My treat. I saw a flicker of greed in Mark's eyes. He clearly envisioned a celebratory dinner, boasting their victory. "That sounds lovely, Dad," Emily agreed, her smile genuine this time. They left shortly after, leaving me alone with the rain and my thoughts. I picked up the phone, dialing a number I hadn't used in years. "David, it's Robert. I need your help." The voice on the other end was warm and familiar. "Robert, it's been too long. What can I do for you?" I explained my situation, the betrayal, the impending loss of my home. David listened patiently, then chuckled. "Those vultures," he muttered. "Don't you worry, Robert. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. We'll take care of this." A wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. And Emily and Mark, they had no idea what was coming. They were so focused on their imagined victory, they hadn't noticed the quiet storm gathering on the horizon. They wouldn't be celebrating next week. They would be facing the consequences of their actions. I looked out at the rain, a faint smile playing on my lips. The game was on. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Mark, ever the picture of polite concern, placed a mug of lukewarm tea in my hand. "Dad," he began, his voice smooth as always, "Emily and I have been talking. We're worried about you, rattling around in this big house all alone." Emily, perched on the edge of the sofa, nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's just too much for you to manage, Dad. The stairs, the garden, it's not safe." My heart sank. I knew this conversation was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud, cloaked in feigned concern, was a fresh wound. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice tight. Mark exchanged a quick glance with Emily. "Well," he started, clearing his throat, "we've been looking at some lovely assisted living facilities in Florida. Sunshine, activities, people your own age." He trailed off, as if picturing me, shuffled off to some sunny graveyard. Florida, the word hung in the air like a bad omen. I'd spent my life building this home, brick by brick, memory by memory, and now they wanted to ship me off to some sterile, prepackaged retirement community 1,000 miles from everything I knew and loved. "Florida," I repeated, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "That's quite a change," Emily chimed in, her voice saccharine. "Think of it as a new adventure. Dad, you deserve to relax, enjoy your golden years. No more worrying about bills or repairs or this house." Mark added, a little too quickly. He recovered smoothly. "Of course, selling the house would give you a nice nest egg to enjoy in Florida." There it was, the real reason the house, my house. They'd been circling like vultures ever since the authorities seized my accounts. Thanks to Mark's miscalculations, shall we say. My life savings gone, and now they wanted the last thing I had left. "I appreciate your concern," I said, forcing a smile, "but I'm not ready for Florida. I'm happy here." Mark's smile faltered. "Dad, be reasonable. You can't stay here alone. It's not practical." "How manage?" I insisted, my grip tightening on the tea mug. "I'm more resilient than you think." Emily sighed dramatically. "Dad, we're just trying to help. This house is too much for you. You're not getting any younger." Her words stung, a reminder of my vulnerability, of the power they now held over me. "I understand," I said, my voice weary. "Let me think about it. I'll let you know my decision." It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. I would think about it. I would think about how to protect myself, how to safeguard what little I had left. They wanted me out, wanted to strip me bare. They saw me as a frail old man, easily manipulated, ready to be discarded. But they were wrong. I was not broken. Not yet. Mark and Emily exchanged another look, a flicker of frustration passing between them. They hadn't expected resistance. They thought I'd crumble, grateful for their concern. "Of course, Dad," Mark said, his voice regaining its smooth veneer. "Take all the time you need, but don't wait too long. These places fill up quickly." He patted my shoulder, a condescending gesture that made my jaw clench. As they left, I watched them from the window, their figures receding into the rain-streaked twilight. They thought they had won, they thought they had me cornered. But I was just beginning to fight. The flicker of a plan, a spark of defiance, ignited within me. They underestimated me. They underestimated the lengths a father would go to protect what was his. They saw weakness where there was resolve, vulnerability where there was cunning. They thought they could take everything, but I still had a few cards to play. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my living room floor. I poured Jack, my old friend from the force, a cup of coffee, the aroma a small comfort in the otherwise desolate air of my home. "So, Robert," Jack said, settling into the worn armchair, "tell me everything." I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Talking about Emily and Mark's betrayal, even to a trusted friend, felt like tearing open a barely healed wound. But I knew I needed help. "They think I'm senile, Jack. They think I'm ready for the scrap heap." He raised an eyebrow, a silent prompt to continue. "They want me in that retirement community in Florida, Sunshine Gardens." I spat the name out like a bitter pill. I explained the whole sordid affair, starting with Mark's business dealings that led to the seizure of my house, that I'd worked my entire life for. He used my address as the registered office for his import-export business, I said, using air quotes that Jack easily deciphered. Turns out his imports were a little more exotic than advertised. Jack chuckled grimly. "Right. And now they want you packed off to Florida so they can sell the place before the authorities figure out they've been duped." He sipped his coffee, eyes narrowed in thought. "Smart, but sloppy. Typical Mark." "Typical," I echoed, the word dripping with bitterness. I recounted how Emily had sweetly suggested the move, painting idyllic pictures of sunny days and shuffleboard tournaments. She said, "Dad, it'll be so much easier for you. No more stairs, no more yard work." My voice cracked. "Easier for them?" She meant. Jack nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and simmering anger. "They figured a confused old man would be an easy target. Lucky for you, Robert, you're far from confused." He leaned forward, a glint in his eye. "Tell me, what kind of dirt does Mark have on his shoes? Anything we can use?" I thought for a moment, sifting through the years of casual observations and overheard conversations. Mark was slick, always careful, but he wasn't infallible. "He's been talking about expanding his business," I said, my fingers drumming on the armrest. "Something about a new partner, someone with connections." Jack's ears perked up. "Connections, you say? That's interesting. And what about Emily? She involved in any of this?" I shook my head. "Emily's always been impressionable." Mark whispers sweet nothings in her ear, and she's putty in his hands. "I don't think she grasps the gravity of what he's doing." A sadness washed over me as I spoke. I still loved my daughter, despite everything. "Okay," Jack said, pulling out a small notepad. "Give me everything you've got. Names, dates, locations, anything, no matter how insignificant it seems." I spent the next hour relaying every detail I could remember, every whispered phone call, every furtive meeting, every lie Emily and Mark had spun. Jack listened intently, jotting down notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. By the time he finished, the room was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. "This is good, Robert," Jack said, closing his notepad with a decisive snap. "This is very good. It gives us a starting point." He stood up, extending a hand. "Don't worry, old friend. I'll get to the bottom of this." I clasped his hand, a surge of hope coursing through me. "Thank you, Jack. You don't know what this means to me," he smiled, a reassuring glint in his eye. "Just sit tight, Robert, and start thinking about how you want to spend that Florida sunshine beckos. It might just be Mark and Emily taking that trip after all." He left me then, the closing of the door echoing in the sudden silence. I stood alone in the twilight, a flicker of anticipation warming the chill that had settled in my bones. I looked around at the familiar surroundings, the photographs on the mantelpiece, the worn rug beneath my feet. This was my home, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me, not even my own daughter. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, a long time, I felt a sense of control returning. I knew Jack. He was thorough, relentless, and when he was finished, Mark and Emily would learn a valuable lesson about the price of betrayal. The wheels were in motion, the game, as they say, was afoot, and I had a feeling the upcoming holidays were going to be interesting. The dust motes danced in the afternoon sunbeams slanting through my living room window. My living room, for now. Anyway, Emily and Mark still thought they had me cornered. "Dad, it's for the best," Emily had said just yesterday, her voice dripping with false concern. "Assisted living will take such a weight off your shoulders. You won't have to worry about the house. The bills are my assets," I thought bitterly, watching a robin peck at the feeder outside. Mark, predictably, chimed in with, "Exactly, Robert. Think of the peace of mind. The only peace I craved was knowing my own daughter and her husband weren't plotting to steal me blind, but I wasn't about to let them see how deeply their betrayal cut. Instead, I'd played along, nodding weakly, murmuring about considering their suggestion. "I suppose I am getting on," I'd said, feigning a tremor in my hand. They'd exchanged a smug glance, one I pretended not to notice. They wanted me gone, out of the picture, into some sterile facility where I'd be out of their hair, while they plundered what I'd spent a lifetime building. They thought they were so clever, maneuvering me into this position after Mark's disastrous business dealings cost me my house. They'd acted so concerned, so solicitous. "We'll take care of everything, Dad," Emily had purred. "Just sign here." Little did they know I'd been making my own arrangements. Yesterday's charade with Emily and Mark had been the final act. Now the curtain was about to rise on my own performance. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I smoothed my jacket, took a deep breath, and opened it to reveal a familiar face I hadn't seen in years. "Daniel," I said, extending my hand. "Good to see you." "Come in, Daniel." A shrewd and discreet investigator, a ghost from my past life in the city. "Step inside, Robert," he replied, his grip firm. "You look well." We exchanged pleasantries. Then I got down to business. I laid out the situation, explaining Mark's shady dealings, the foreclosure, Emily's sudden, suffocating concern for my well-being, and their relentless push to get me into assisted living. Daniel listened intently, his eyes sharp and focused. "I need proof," I said finally, "concrete evidence of their scheme. Something I can use to expose them." Daniel nodded. "I understand. I've already begun gathering information. Mark's financial records are messy, to say the least." He pulled a thick file from his briefcase. "There are a number of questionable transactions, shell corporations, offshore accounts. It's a tangled web, but I'm confident I can unravel it." He flipped open the file, revealing a maze of documents, highlighted figures, and complex diagrams. This, he tapped a highlighted section, is particularly interesting. A large sum of money transferred to a newly established account in Emily's name shortly after the foreclosure proceedings began. My stomach churned. Seeing it in black and white, the stark reality of their betrayal hit me with renewed force. My own daughter. Anything else? I asked, my voice tight. I'm still digging, Daniel said, closing the file. But I'm also looking into the assisted living facility they've chosen for you. Something doesn't feel right there either. He paused, a knowing look in his eyes. Let's just say I've encountered similar situations before. Families eager to expedite the inheritance process. My blood ran cold. They weren't just after my money. They wanted me gone, period. The realization was sickening. I appreciate this, Daniel, I said, managing a weak smile. More than you know, he nodded. Just doing my job, Robert. I'll keep you updated, and don't worry, he added with a reassuring pat on my shoulder. We'll get this sorted out. As he left, I stood by the window, watching him walk down the driveway. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn. My lawn for now, but soon the game would change. I had the pieces I needed, Daniel's information, the evidence of their deceit. It was all falling into place. Emily and Mark thought they had won. They thought they had outmaneuvered me, pushed me to the brink. They were wrong. I was just getting started. I wouldn't be banished to some forgotten corner. I wouldn't let them steal my life's work. They underestimated me. They underestimated the lengths a father would go to protect what was his. And they were about to learn a very expensive lesson. The thought of their faces when I revealed my hand, when I exposed their lies and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. A small, cold smile touched my lips. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Sunlight streamed into my kitchen, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. Emily and Mark sat across from me at the kitchen table, their faces expectant. Dad, Emily began, her voice saccharine sweet. We've been thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if you sold this old place and moved down to Florida with us? Mark nodded eagerly, adding, think of the sunshine, the golf courses. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence hang heavy between us. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, my voice carefully neutral. But I'm quite content here. Emily's smile faltered. But, Dad, she pressed, this house is too much for you to manage. It's practically falling apart. Mark chimed in again. And the property taxes. They're crippling. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sell it, Dad. Let us help you invest the money. You'll be much more comfortable. I met his gaze, a faint smile playing on my lips. Comfortable, you say? I reached across the table and picked up a thick manila envelope. I received something interesting in the mail today, I said, sliding the envelope across to them. Emily opened it hesitantly, pulling out a sheaf of documents. Her face paled as she scanned the pages. Mark peered over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. What is this? Emily stammered. This is a detailed report, I explained calmly, prepared by a forensic accountant, outlining your rather creative financial dealings. Mark, I leaned back in my chair, watching their expressions. It seems you've been using my daughter's name to secure loans you've then defaulted on, loans secured against, well, let's just say assets that don't actually belong to you. Mark's face was now a mask of fear. I can explain, he stammered, his eyes darting between Emily and me. It's a misunderstanding, Emily cried, her voice rising in panic. Dad, you have to believe us. We were just trying to help. Help yourselves, you mean, I corrected, my voice hardening. To my house, my life savings, everything I've worked for. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Dad, please, we didn't mean for it to go this far. I stood up, towering over them. I trusted you, Emily, I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. I welcomed Mark into our family, and this is how you repay me, by trying to steal everything I own. I turned and walked to the window, looking out at the familiar landscape. This house, this land, it was more than just bricks and mortar. It was my legacy, and I wouldn't let them take it from me. I turned back to face them. I've contacted the authorities, I announced, my voice steady. They'll be here shortly. I suggest you both have your stories straight. Emily let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. Mark just stared at me, his face ashen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. I watched as the color drained from Mark's face, the realization of his predicament finally sinking in. Emily looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Dad, she whispered, please don't do this. I met her gaze, my heart aching. You did this to yourselves, Emily, I said softly. I gave you everything, and you threw it all away. The sirens reached a crescendo as police cars pulled up outside the house. Officers entered, their expressions grim. I stepped aside as they approached Mark, placing him under arrest. Emily watched in stunned silence as they led him away. I turned to face her, my daughter, the one I had loved and cherished. I'm sorry, Emily, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but you made your choice, and with that I walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. The house was silent once more, except for the faint echo of Emily's sobs. I stood in the kitchen, the sunlight still streaming through the window, a strange sense of peace washing over me. My home was safe, my legacy was secure, and justice, in its own way, had been served. This house, this life I built, it would continue. I would rebuild, stronger than before. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Hello, David, it's Robert. Remember that investment opportunity we discussed in the Caymans? I'm ready to move forward. The late afternoon sun slanted through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It should have been peaceful, a quiet moment to enjoy the familiar comfort of my home. Instead, a knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. Emily and Mark should be here any minute, I muttered to myself, adjusting the legal documents spread out on the coffee table. It was hard to believe it had come to this, confronting my own daughter, the child I raised and loved, about her blatant attempt to steal my home, my life savings. They thought they were so clever, maneuvering me into that assisted living facility in Florida, sweet-talking me about sunshine and shuffleboard, while their real plan was to sell this house out from under me. Dad, it's for your own good, Emily had said, her voice dripping with false concern. Florida is so much better for your health. Mark, ever the charmer, had chimed in. We'll even help you pack. They hadn't counted on me having old friends in high places. David, my former business partner, still owed me a favor, and his investigative skills had unearthed the truth about Mark's shady dealings, the very reason this house was temporarily seized in the first place. It wasn't my fault, but they'd used it as an excuse, a lever to pry away what I'd worked my entire life to build. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing the hollowness I felt inside. I took a deep breath, composing myself. Showtime, I opened the door to find Emily and Mark, dressed impeccably as always. "Dad," Emily began, a strained smile on her face. "We were getting worried. Everything all right?" "Come in," I said, my voice flat. "We have things to discuss." They exchanged a nervous glance, but followed me into the living room. Mark's eyes immediately went to the papers on the coffee table. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Just some paperwork," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. They perched on the edge of the sofa, their usual relaxed demeanor replaced by an unsettling tension. "Emily," I began, looking directly at my daughter, "do you remember the assisted living facility brochure you showed me? The one in Florida?" Her smile faltered. "Yes, Dad," she stammered. "We thought it would be a good option for you." "A good option for whom, Emily?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "For you, of course," Mark interjected quickly. "We just want what's best for you." "I appreciate your concern," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, "but I'm perfectly capable of deciding what's best for me, and what's best for me is staying in my own home." Emily shifted uncomfortably. "But, Dad, with the house, the legal issues," she trailed off. "The legal issues that your husband conveniently failed to mention were caused by his own fraudulent activities," I stated calmly, watching their faces pale. Mark sputtered. "That's not true. I was just trying to help." "Help yourself, you mean," I countered, holding up a copy of the report David had provided. "This details every transaction, every shady deal you've made. Deals that put my house at risk." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mark, is this true?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He avoided her gaze, his silence a deafening confirmation. "Emily," I continued, my voice softening slightly, "I loved you, I trusted you, and you, along with your husband, tried to take advantage of me, tried to steal my home, my security. I can't believe you would do this to me." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Dad," she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I've already contacted my lawyer," I said. "The authorities are aware of Mark's activities," and I added with a touch of grim satisfaction, "the charges against my house have been dropped." It seems the authorities were more interested in the actual criminal than the innocent homeowner caught in the crossfire. Mark's face was ashen. He looked from me to Emily, then back to me again. You set me up," he hissed. "I simply uncovered the truth," I corrected him. "And now I think it's time for you both to leave." Emily stood up, her face streaked with tears. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I simply nodded, my heart heavy with sadness. She turned and walked out, followed by her disgraced husband. I watched them go, the silence in the room amplifying the hollowness within me. The house was safe, my assets secure, but the cost of this victory was a wound that might never fully heal. The betrayal of my own daughter, the shattering of trust, left a scar deeper than any financial loss. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the room. I sat there, alone in the silence, wondering if the warmth of family, the comfort of belonging, would ever return to this house again.